Hello, welcome to the Georgia Museum of Art. We might have a few people trickle in as we give people time to arrive after school and work, but we are so happy to have you here tonight for our program, An Evening of Poetry. My name is Ciel Rodriguez, and I'm the Curatorial Assistant in Contemporary Art here at the museum. And we're so excited to be celebrating National Poetry Month with a full slate of poetry readings inspired by the exhibition upstairs, We Too Are Made of Wonders. The program will begin with a reading by visiting poet Diane Thiel from her book, Questions from Outer Space, followed by original poems written by student writers from Stillpoint Literary Magazine, an undergraduate student-run publication here at the University of Georgia. Before we jump into the poetry readings, I thought I would give a quick introduction to the exhibition upstairs, just to show y'all kind of what we're working with the themes and inspiration for. The title of the show, We Too Are Made of Wonders, is borrowed from a poem written by U.S. Poet Laureate Ada Limon that sparked my initial interest in the themes behind curating this exhibition. On October 14th, 2024, the U.S. sent Limon's poem to space. In Praise of Mystery, a poem for Europa, accompanied NASA's Europa Clipper spacecraft, which will travel 1.8 billion miles to study Jupiter's moon, Europa. The spacecraft's mission? To study the surface of this moon, which is thought to have a salty ocean beneath its icy surface. Limon's poem, In Praise of Mystery, will reach this moon in April 2030. In the last two stanzas, Limon writes, "O second moon, we too are made of water, of vast and beckoning seas. We too are made of wonders, of great and ordinary loves, of small, invisible worlds, of a need to call out through the dark." And so after reading this poem, I started looking at our permanent collection here at the museum and looking for artists that were responding to similar themes in Limon's poem. Artists looking at the night sky, the universe, scientific mysteries and discoveries, the solar system, and more. As you'll see in the exhibition upstairs, poems are used as guiding lights in each gallery, embodying humanity's collective interest in the sky and the stars. Moving through a galaxy of various connections, the exhibition considers how artists and poets explore and respond to the universe around them, encouraging us to be curious and engage with a sense of awe and wonder at the world around us. And today, we're so lucky to have one of those poets joining us. So with that introduction to the exhibition, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Diane Thiel. Diane is the author of 12 books of poetry, nonfiction, creative writing, and pedagogy, including Questions from Outer Space. Published in 2022, she's also published Echolocations, Resistance Fantasies, and The White Horse, A Columbian Journey. Thiel's poem, Listening in Deep Space, is on view in the exhibition upstairs and was selected for Best American Poetry in 2023. Her book, Questions from Outer Space, also won the Independent Press Book Award. Thiel's work has appeared in many journals, including Poetry, the Hudson Review, the Harvard Review, the Dark Horse, Rattle, and Terrain. Her poetry is reprinted in over 60 major anthologies and has been set to music and translated widely. She's received numerous awards, such as the PEN Translation Award, the Robert Frost Award, the Robinson Jeffers Prize, and she's a Fulbright Scholar. Fluent in several languages, Thiel received her undergraduate and graduate degrees from Brown University and has taught English and creative writing for over 25 years. She's a Regents Professor at the University of New Mexico and the Associate Chair of the Department of English. Thiel has also traveled and lived in Europe, South America, Asia, and Australia, working on literary and environmental projects. She lives in Albuquerque with her family in the foothills of the Sandia Mountains. Please join me in welcoming Diane Thiel to the stage.
Thank you so much, CL. That was such a lovely introduction. And thank you so much for inviting me here. This was a really wonderful experience, and I just love the exhibit. As what did my mother, who's here in the audience here today, said, I don't want to leave. The exhibit is just beautiful, and I think you've done a beautiful job with it, and incorporating and connecting all the poems and art from the permanent collection as well. So thank you all for coming, and I'm so delighted to be able to share some poems with you today. And it's interesting, this book, Questions from Outer Space, has basically many different connections to space, and I'll share a few different kinds of examples, and then also maybe read one or two new poems and a poem or two from other books. I'm going to read for about 25 minutes or so. And I'm going to open with a poem about time, because a lot of these poems deal with time and space and the connections between time and space. And this is a poem, Time Won't Do It. So, because it really won't, So, all right. Time won't do it. We expect too much of time, give it mythical powers, believe a certain set of hours, days, or years will be the salve to solve it all. We treat it like an oracle, believing time will tell, expecting time to heal because our sayings say it will. We expect time to do our dirty work, clean up after us. But time won't do it by itself, not without us. Won't really heal the wounds, will only cover them. Like geologic sands might sift into a smooth surface for a time, until some event or seemingly small shift unearths the fissure underneath, sometimes when we least expect it. Over time might help, but time sure won't do it by itself. And then I'd like to, set list. I'd like to share this poem, Measure by Time, which is actually a poem written in response to Vladimir Kush's painting, Open World, which actually is the cover of the book. So it's a bit surreal, but there are a few poems here that get a little more surreal, I think. So. The children can easily fit themselves inside the toy that fits inside a pocket, shifting size and shape throughout the day and then expanding into their dreams. The world opens through the fairy tale, the counterpoint to climb, holding on to the music, note by note, measure by time. It might be entirely new or a memory we have already held in our hands. Existence as we know it, the song wound tight and coiled, is about to expand. From one angle, it might look like a simple combination of a container and a sphere. Such a small space compared to the great expanse, but holding more than the usual flotsam of the stars. The volcano is smoking and sure to change things, shift the plates and continents. Something is arriving. All the elements could come together at any moment, and the planets in the distance are watching closely to see what happens next. And I'm going to share a poem called Remotely. In Questions from Outer Space. There are a number of poems that take the perspective of someone who is not of this world, commenting on basic aspects of society. And this one, its little formal angle is that it uses the word remotely in each line. So this is remotely. In the culture of remotely, things were heading that way long before the virus. Once they could remotely operate things, every home in remotely had one. The young and the old fought over who would remotely control their evenings. Some remotely raised their children, absent or remotely present even when they were there. Some things taken for granted were harder to do remotely. Procreation was possible, but remotely desirable once it became that clinical, remotely transferring cells and later cell phones, once they all only remotely connected. We have observed them remotely for years as they put up walls, charted all their remotely comprehensible conflicts, and decided, when in remotely, we would do as the remotelians, keep to our screens and only get remotely involved. Thank you. So there is a poem in here, The Farthest Side, which plays a little on the Far Side comics. Anyone love the Far Side comics? And there's some references to the various Far Sides that are sort of described within the poem. And I thought, in some ways, when I was writing this poem, was a little anecdote about connecting with my father over the Far Side cartoons, comics. But I in the end, I feel like it sort of evolved into something else. In the end, as poems often do. So, and there's a reference to Haydn's "Those Winter Sundays" early in the poem with the austere days. So. The Farthest Side. Some afternoons in the small space of time between my coming home from school and his heading off to work, second shift and maybe some of third, what did I know of those austere days? My father would have a question waiting for me. We couldn't usually find a way to get beyond all the history that divided us, that kept us far from each other for such a small house. But when I came home, he would sometimes have the paper open to The Far Side, usually one that went a bit further over the edge, and would ask if I understood this one. We had our dark favorites that were fairly clear. The engorged snake stuck in the crib with the teddy bear. The spider web at the bottom of the slide. If we pull this off, we'll eat like kings. But the fact that he asked me, even back then, about the more complicated ones, believing I would know about natural selection, space, modern art, or poetry, meant more to me than I would have admitted, more than I even realized at the time. When we talked about cow poetry, it went beyond the cows damming the electric fence. The pilots wondering what a mountain goat was doing in that cloud bank ahead brought us to the moment outside the frame. Maybe Larson intended that a few of these, like the meat in the bowl on the window table, or cow tools with its unrecognizable objects, would resist any quick interpretation and just get people talking. And there is another poem written to a painting, the Dali, and Dali makes an appearance on the cover of another of my books, Echolocations, but this is a poem, Three Surrealist Women and the Skins of an Orchestra, after Dali. By the suggestion of an ocean, the rocks allow a passage. Three women gather the skins of the instruments used to win their pinkish hue. One appears empty-handed, triumphant in her tatters. One gently drapes the cello over her arms, more like an offering than a child. The oldest blends into stone, holds the piano by a fingertip. If she wanted, she could shake it like a sheet, but for the moment it lies like a puddle in the sand. They gather round. They might be about to fold things up for the night. It is over, or it might be about to begin. And I'm going to share a New Mexico poem, I'll call it that, but it's really also, this is a poem that is from a real experience of spending time in Taos, New Mexico, because I live in Albuquerque, and the Lawrence tree itself, yeah, is actually at the D.H. Lawrence Ranch in Taos, or outside of Taos, and connected to the University of New Mexico. And this poem reflects both that experience in real life, but also connects to the George O'Keeffe painting, The Lawrence Tree, because of the perspective, I think, in the poem and in the painting. So, under the Lawrence Tree. The summer night cool on our skin, the colors fading quickly into evening. Together here, we grew into the Sangre de Cristo skies. My children born and rooted in this place, it became home, waiting for the hummingbird, watching the lizard disappear into the dusk. Like Lawrence, fellow traveler, they can see the tiny dinosaur that darted into his palm. This land held me when I thought it was over, brought me back, showed me another way to go, took me to this time lying here on our backs with new eyes. Poets, artists, children, tilt the world, our view to the branches and through to the stars. So I have these little experimental poems in here that began as a sort of, I had a few of them, and then they grew over time, and basically they were short pieces of things my children had said when they were younger, and then I kind of introduced them with long titles. And there's a quotation that opens in the book, in this section, from Ivan Boland, who says, "I learned when I had young children that you can always do something. If you can't do a poem, you can do a line. And if you can't do a line, you can do an image. And that pathway that leads you along in fragments becomes astonishingly valuable." And I think I have felt this very much over the years. And so I'm going to share a few of these. These are short subjects with long titles, epigrams on art, poetics, and philosophy. 3-year-old Christabel, on her mother asking, "What are you girls talking about in the middle of the night?" "It's not the middle. We're talking in the back of the night." 6-year-old Alexandra explains irony to 5-year-old Arya after Arya's yelling wakes the baby up, and their parents say, "Thanks a lot, Arya." And Arya answers, "You're welcome." "Arya, they don't mean thank you. They mean you did something bad. It's another way of saying it." 3-year-old Dylan on his siblings teaching him how to write his name correctly. "It's my name. I can write it any way I want." The children measuring the world by idiom and a few arms. How far is arm's length? How far is that? How long an arm? Their arm? Your arm? Or both? The morning after our visit to the Museo del Prado in Madrid, where 5-year-old Dylan was fascinated by the monstrous figures in Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights. "Last night I dreamt about monsters. Good thing I like monsters." 4-year-old Arya, early seeker, looking intently at the Bible. "This is a very big book. I'm trying to find God in here. It's G-O-D, right?" Dylan, meaning to say invincible, discusses a fellow first grader. "He kicked me because he thought I was irresistible." The children, after overhearing another discussion about work. Mommy's work at the university is so hard. Now they want her to be a chair. A chair? What? Are they going to sit on her? And the answer to that is yes. And just a few more. Christabel and Alexander interpret a work of abstract art. Is this toddler art? Maybe it's a roller coaster or a treasure hunt. It could be stairs or nothing. Who hasn't felt that way? Okay. 4-year-old Dylan asking about different holidays. When is the end? Is the end a holiday? 4-year-old Aria during our nightly ritual of poem, story, song, and come back for a secret. Another story, as she puts it, from her brain on being asked by her tired mother to make it a very short story tonight. Aria was walking through the forest. No animals, the end. So a little piece of flash fiction there. And the little poem that follows these in the book is Time in the Wilderness. To hear it, we have to be there over time. Tune an ear to the song, sparrow at sunrise, the great horned owl at dusk, reminding us not to miss the trees for the theory of the forest. Turning an old saying around a child's observation. The simplest question, opening the world again. And I'd like to make a little departure into echolocations. This is the book that has the Dali, the archaeological reminiscence on the front. And I'm just going to read one poem from here, but it seems perfect venue to do so. And it's a poem called Perception. And it's a triolet, only a triolet, it uses the repetition, but then changes it because there are a few to show two different perceptions of the same painting. And it was based on a friend who had painted his wife. He said, this is a painting of my wife. And it was a small figure down a kind of an alley. And she looked and she said, oh, I'm so small. And then she kind of left. And he said, that was how long I would watch her until she disappeared when she would leave the apartment. So, meaning and I was like, oh, come back here. Listen to that. So I wrote this poem for them. Perception. All she saw was how small he painted her, disappearing down the street, through a dark valley of trucks and cars. All she saw was how small he painted her. Her tiny form blurred but central like a fire, burning long after the eye's heat. What he painted was how long he watched her, disappearing down that street. And I was trying to decide which I would read from Resistance Fantasies. I always like to give a nod to my other books here, so I don't forget they're here. So, and the Resistance Fantasies, there's a poem I like to read sometimes, which responds to a poem by Edna St. Vincent Millay. And it also, I think, is good for students who are in all kinds of workshops where everyone is telling you what to do with your poems until they might scarcely resemble your poem, and so you have all this advice, and in the end, it's really between you and the poem, right? So, but this is an editorial suggestive from a 21st century editor, which is kind of a imagined editor writing back to Edna St. Vincent Millay about her poem. So I'm going to share Edna St. Vincent Millay's poem and then kind of go into my editorial suggestive. This one is by Edna St. Vincent Millay. What lips these lips have kissed, and where and why, I have forgotten, and what arms have lain under my head till morning. But the rain is full of ghosts tonight that tap the glass and listen for reply. And in my heart there stirs a quiet pain for unremembered lads that not again will turn to me at midnight with a cry. Thus in the winter stands the lonely tree, nor knows what birds have vanished one by one, yet knows its boughs more silent than before. I cannot say what loves have come and gone. I only know that summer sang in me a little while, that in me sings no more. So this is my imagined editor, 21st century editor, telling, Edna St. Vincent Millay how to basically make her poem more sexy. So, oh yeah, I think that was a comment I got at one point, like, make this more sexy. And so I was like, yeah, and it kind of also inspired this particular poem. So, editorial suggestive from a 21st century editor. What lips these lips have kissed and where and why? A hot beginning. What the readers want. But could the lips be hips? Get more upfront to better wake and shock the weary eye. Must it be ghosts that tap the glass and sigh? Why not a well-remembered lad at the front door, or better at the back? You won't quite let him in, but then, no, what have I to say about it? It's your poem, n'est-ce pas? Lane, good verb. Although the lay could be more tempting. Set the reader's cheeks aflame, bend those boughs, take him up against that tree, out in that rain. And one more thing, oh yes, dear Edna, you must also change your name. So I'm sure that some of you in workshops are experiencing this kind of thing, right? Let's see, I'm going to read a few more poems, three more poems. Take a little water here. So this poem is a newer poem. I thought I would read one that isn't in any of these books, but it was in the Hudson Review not too long ago. And I also thought it was kind of appropriate for the setting. And it's the Blank Museum, and it takes a few shots at, I guess, postmodernism, we might say. I showed it to CL before, and I said, what do you think? So it's the Blank Museum. A reception with visual art, music, poetry readings under one roof. The canvases inspired, all appearing blank. Several named Snow. Music is played in the foyer, but there's no sound. The recordings running in players that don't recognize them. The poetry readings are from blank books, the latest with 73 blank pages emphasizing the emptiness. Reviewers have written hundreds of thousands of words of appreciation for capturing the blankness, focusing on the significance of 73, the vitality of the no-word poem. The sculpture wing houses some of the latest works, their positions marked by ropes, after several visitors stumbled into them, causing a stir in the air. The award-winning architecture of the building is impossible to see. Some outside wanderers who might be distracted by memories of poems with words or thoughts of paintings with images accidentally pass through the new museum some afternoons on their walks, and children have been seen running right through the building as if it isn't even there. And I'm going to close with two poems back to Questions from Outer Space. This is a poem on foot, which was in the Common, and then originally, and then in Questions from Outer Space. So it's on foot, and it's written after a line by Edith Soderbrunn. On foot, I had to cross the galaxy. I left without luggage or gear, knowing nothing I had would be of use out there. It felt long, but I can't say quite how long. Time unfolds in space, and I soon realized this wasn't the average pilgrimage. I grew thankful for the unexpected wormholes, useful to cover some distance. I can't say what I needed to retrieve, or even if, when, or where I left it. It is a secret kept even from me, and frankly, I'm not sure anyone will believe this story anyway. At first, I kept my path as far as I could from the dark matter, though it was always there, and I wished I could understand it more. But once I recognized the energy those expansions could release or create, I knew I could take it back to the shore, finding the swell of that particle wave and all the light in the dark of deep space. And I'm going to close with the poem from the exhibit, Listening in Deep Space, which has references to the items on the Voyager probe and has a little bit of a lighter note in the middle, though it's has I think a kind of serious underpinning in the end. So, listening in deep space. We've always been out looking for answers, telling stories about ourselves, searching for connection, choosing to send out Stravinsky and whale song, which in translation might very well be our undoing instead of a welcome. We launch satellites, probes, telescopes, unfolding like origami, navigating geomagnetic storms, major disruptions. Rovers with spirit and perseverance mapping the unknown, we listen through large arrays adjusted eagerly to hear the news that we are not alone. Considering the history at home, in houses, across continents, oceans, even in quests armed with good intentions, what one seeker has done to another, what will we do when we find each other? Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so looking forward to the students who are going to be reading their poem set. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diane.